Welcome to the Origin Canine podcast, where we speak to authentic and inspiring voices from the working canine world. Listen to this episode, subscribe to the podcast, follow us on social media, and go to origincanine.com. Enjoy the show. Alrighty, g'day guys. Welcome to another episode of the Origin Canine podcast. I told you, bro, it's raw, man. I won't edit the shit. We got Glenn Cooke today. Mate, it's fucking great having you on, dude. I've been cock teasing you for a while. I think about getting you on here. Cock teasing or threatening, I don't know which one of this.
Either one's fine.
Yeah, so thanks, bro, for coming on, man.
A bit of cock teasing, a little bit of threatening helps.
Bit of cock threatening.
Helps with the arousal levels. Arousal is a word that we throw around the dog training industry, so we don't seem to get in so much trouble with it. So there you go.
That's right. We'll try and work the word dopamine into this conversation as much as we can
absolutely.
as
well.
Yep. Hey, dude. So I'm going to take a bit of a new sort of like template with these podcasts, and you're the first victim. So I'm not going to do a big intro thing. I just want to fucking have a chat, man. That's all I want this podcast to be. So,
cool.
And man, we started talking about some stuff before we even recorded. We're talking about like old school Melbourne security days. For the purpose of the people who weren't privy to that conversation, can you rip into when you were a young bloke growing up in Melbourne, and then obviously leading into the security scene specifically for the canine stuff?
Well, we started talking prior to the conversation starting on air about my time in security. And prior to that, I started off in the dog scene. I was with Boyd in Australian dog training, and I'd had spurts here and there of being involved in dog clubs and so forth, but nothing ever serious. It was more like ANKC type obedience that I was doing back then. And then I got involved with Boyd, who was, prior to me becoming a dog trainer, he was my kickboxing coach. So I used to go down. He had a gym in Bayswater. It was a great gym too. It was there was a lot going on there. It was a busy gym. There was a lot of activity, a lot of really hard fellas in my area were training down there at the time. And Boyd was involved in the commandos at the time. So he was there quite a bit, but he had to go off and do his army things here and there. And obviously he had trainers to take care of everything while he wasn't there. But it was a great time. It was a fun time. I often think back to those times with a lot of fondness, because a lot of people that I used to go clubbing with, a lot of people I used to hang around with, a lot of people I used to go, hang at the pubs with and so forth, we were all part of that culture, all part of that kickboxing. It was sort of kickboxing, boxing, Muay Thai livelihood that we were all doing. And unbeknownst to me, Boyd was involved in dog training. And I know I've told this story a bunch of times. If anyone's ever listened to any of my origin stories on anything else, I've talked about it on my own podcast. But he always talked about dogs, but for some reason I got it through my head that he was involved in greyhounds, and I wasn't really involved in. I wasn't interested in anything to do with greyhounds. I didn't go down. I'm not a betting guy. I don't gamble. I don't go to the horses or the track or anything like that. So for me, that was just a non-issue. I never really broached it with him or brought it up or was overly concerned about what was happening in that field. However, at one stage, I got myself I thought he was a Roddy, but he was a Roddy Cross. And I remember Boyd and I were sparring one night, and he was training me for a fight. And we were throwing hands, and, we're sort of sitting down, catching our breath between the rounds. And he said, mate, what's news? I haven't seen you down here for a while. And I said, yeah, I got myself a puppy, and I had to take a couple of weeks off to get him sorted out. He was destroying the house and getting a little bit wiry, and we had neighbors complaining, and there were all sorts of things going down. He said, mate, why aren't you coming down and training with me? I said, he's a Roddy, mate. He's not a greyhound. He goes, the fuck are you talking about? And I said, yeah, he's a like a working dog, a Rottweiler. And he goes, yeah, mate, that's what I train. I'm a working dog guy. And I said, oh. And I said, for some reason, I thought you were into greyhounds. That's why I've been avoiding having this conversation. He said, mate, Thursday night, we're down there. I expect you down. Bring your puppy. I'll see you then. So I went down there, and, mate, it was a fucking eye-opener. something that I'd never, ever seen in my life. It was a Thursday night. It was pitch black. It was in Melbourne. It was cold. It was in the middle of winter. I remember it well. And it was daunting. I went down there. There were people everywhere. There's probably 100 people down there. And it was daunting, mate. They had lights on. Everything was lit up. It was a factory complex that this guy that Boyd was doing, you know, like he trained his dogs, but he's also became quite friendly with him, and they were good colleagues. So he said to Boyd, look, as long as you know, pay me a bit of cash, train my dogs and come down here, you can rent these grounds off me. And it was amazing. It was a terrific facility. It just had acres of land. We could use the buildings. It had a tennis court out the front, which was set up as an agility course and everything. And there were, like, it was predominantly men. It was like a men's club. And there were a few women scattered around everywhere, but it was unbelievable. Something I'd never had the privilege of seeing. And I still haven't seen anything quite like it to this day, even though I've been involved in some dog events here and there. So I rock up down there, bring my dog. I had got no idea what's going on. I met Boyd's fiance for the first time, which was a lady called Maureen. And she said, your puppy person is going to be a lady named Kylie. She's going to be waiting for you around the corner. We'll start calling classes shortly. You can go in and when it's called. So I'm sort of sitting there and I'm talking to a bunch of people. And I thought these people aren't going to want to know me. You know, like I'm just some noob that's rocked up here. I'm sort of standing there sitting with my thumb up my ass, waiting to take my puppy in this puppy training course. And yeah, people walking up and the nice puppy, mate, you know, good on you. How you going? And it started off as a really friendly environment. So I loved it, mate. I took to it like a duck to water. I just could not get enough of it. I finally found my people, my village. It was something that I aspired to. It's something that I just absolutely loved. I was in a pocket there where I loved my training. I was really enjoying the gym work and, you know, I had mates that I was training there, but this was unlike anything that I'd ever encountered. And I kind of thought to myself, I've finally found something that I'm really passionate about. And up until that time, I was grifting through life. You know, like I said, I was enjoying things. I was enjoying going out. I was enjoying hanging with my mates. I was enjoying things, but this was different. It was just another level altogether. Something that it's difficult to put words to because I haven't really encountered it again. And there's an episode that we're going to eventually do for the Canine Paradigm where we're going to talk about getting a bunch of people to say, if you could have your ability to turn back time, like travel back in time and find a place, where would you go and why? I would go back there in a heartbeat. I don't know how to explain why and how I felt that way about where I was and what I was doing at that time. Because it's like a door swung over. It's like a door swung open and it exposed me to this completely different room, something that was unbeknownst to me, like what was going to happen, who was going to be there. And it just was a fucking party or ongoing. Every time I'd turn up there, it was just something new, something I was learning, something I was taking in. And I'm talking years into it, and I was just not getting bored of it. You know, like I graduated from being a client to being asked to be a trainer. And that happened within a couple of years' grace of each other. First of all, I wanted Harley to grow up and I wanted to learn some grassroots sort of training and establish some foundations with him. However, it wasn't long after that the offer was thrown my way. Let's throw you in a training course. Let's get you involved in becoming a trainer. And that came through Boyd. Him and I knew each other. We had history. We were friendly, and it was just one thing leading to another. It was like learning, learning how to dance and then finally understanding how to do all the steps and memorizing them and how everything falls in place. And before you know it, you're breezing through it. You're just flying through every step. And it was just like, I couldn't wait. I couldn't wait to see what was around the corner. I couldn't wait to learn the next thing. I couldn't wait to teach the next dog. So I understand when I meet new people who are in the industry and they're just getting their legs in it and they've got themselves a dog or they've got themselves a bunch of people, I understand why they feel as passionate as they do. And I lost myself for a period of time. I became maniacal about it. It was such a an amazing thing to do, but it was a huge obsession. I kind of felt like, and I say this respectfully for anyone listening, but I kind of felt like an alcoholic, that I was drinking on this good stuff every night, and it was so amazing that I just didn't want to kick the habit. And anytime I sort of drifted away from it, I got withdrawals and I had to go back to it. And that first sip got me straight back into the game. I couldn't wait. It was just amazing. So I know I've started waffling on a lot about the dog training side of it, and it was leading into the security side. Those worlds were colliding because most of the people that I was working and training with down there were involved in the industry in some way or another. There were a lot of military guys hanging around during that time who were mates with Boyd and through the kickboxing fraternity. There are a lot of police, former and current. So yeah, former, current, and people looking to go into the police force. And there were a lot of security people there as well, a lot of people who own security companies. There was a good medley of industry people who were both sworn and unsworn sort of people involved in that. And I was sort of marching up the chain at that point in time. I started establishing myself as, even though I was a young guy, I was developing myself as a senior person for Australian Dog Training, which was the company. So I was training a lot of these people. And even though I was a younger guy, I was sort of commanding a lot of people who were, you know, serious players. They were real ballers in their field. And I didn't think anything of it. I didn't think, oh, I'm not good enough to teach these people. I was hungry and I wanted to learn. And I was very, you know, like my ego was flaring out of control. And for me, I didn't think anything of it. I just thought, yeah, I'm powerful at this. I can do this. Like, I don't care who you are or what your background is or what you've done or what you've achieved. This is my domain. This is my kingdom. And this is what I'm going to do. And yes, I know that sounds egotistical because I was an ego beast back then, but I loved it. I was just so on the gas at that point in time. It was just an incredible feeling, as I've already expressed. So being involved in that industry, as I said, connected me to people who were involved in security. And the topic came up a fair few times where people were saying, do you want extra work? Like, are you looking for extra work? And I said, yeah, I wouldn't mind getting involved in the security industry. I wouldn't mind, you know, getting my license, being involved and learning about it. I was never planning on moving into the military. At one stage, I was looking into being involved in the police force, but I had a very, very early Victorian Christian bred grandmother who absolutely dismissed the idea of that at any stage. She just literally blackmailed me, black and blue, emotionally blackmailed me. She said, if you join the police, you'll literally have me having a heart attack and being in hospital. And I was very close to my grandmother at the time. It was ridiculous, but you have no idea the pull and the control that this woman had. She was an extreme matriarch in my family. So that didn't happen. I didn't join the police force. I said I wouldn't do it. So the next best thing, I got involved in security. And as I was telling you before the lights came on and we hit the record button for the show, when I first got involved in it, there were some people who were reluctant to hire me and put me in some of the gigs because they were pretty rough spots in early Melbourne at that point in time. There were some people who, in some of the pubs and clubs back then, even though, as I said to you, there's still problems now, there's still murders, there's still things that go on out in society. But back then in early Melbourne, a lot of people really loved to throw hands with security. They really loved it. It was just like, it was kind of like a roadhouse scene back then in some of those nightclubs. And you tell people these stories and they roll their eyes, but I think to them myself, you weren't there. It's like you guys when you're in the army, you know, like all the shit that you have to put up with and some of the terrible things and the trauma that you have to put up with, and people talk to you like you're a piece of shit or you don't know what you're talking about or why did you do that or anything like that. But you just think, mate, you weren't there. Like you have no right to roll your eyes or contradict what I'm saying. You weren't there. You weren't on the street. You didn't see what was going on. You know, like there was some, I'll lead into some stories later on, but I want to flip back to it. Otherwise I'm jumping all over the place. So when I was a young guy in my, between 19 and 22, I had a real baby face. And a lot of times people would just say to me, mate, you just look too young to be involved in security. You just have a really punchable face. And like I said, I was training with Boyd back then. I was doing a lot of martial arts, a lot of boxing, a lot of training. I was in the gym all the time. If I wasn't at the fight club, I was down at the gym or something like that. So, I could handle myself. I could throw hands pretty well when I was a young fella. And I thought to myself, well, like I've got this training, I've got this capability, I've got the ability to look after myself. Why are you insulting me? And why aren't you allowing me to have the opportunity to work in this industry? So a friend of Boyd's and a guy that I got to know quite well, a guy called Jeff Carthew, who was a former police officer and started his own security company, Greater Melbourne Security, I think it was called. So Jeff approached me one night and he goes, mate, maybe if you grow a beard or something like that, it will change the way your face looks. And he goes, because I do agree. He goes, I'm just worried that you've just got this really young boy's face, and what people in the industry need is somebody to be taken seriously, like not get orders from a young guy. Otherwise, it offends people and it creates conflict, where security is not about creating conflict, it's about managing conflict. And Jeff was a good mentor, actually. He was a good guy. He was sensible, because I think when I went into it, I was kind of wanting to test myself. If I'm being honest, I wanted to be out on the street. I wanted to have the opportunity to, get into a bit of argy-bargy in real life sort of stuff. Because a lot of work that I was doing, or a lot of training I was doing, it was simulation. Like you are hitting each other and you are fighting and you are like you're getting knocked about. But it's still controlled and it's simulated. And it sounds weird. Some people might think this is a stupid thing to say, but other people know exactly what I'm saying when I say this. But I needed to know that I was capable of my training. I needed to know that if I was on the street and I was working, that if I got into a fight, that I could handle myself properly. Like, it kind of felt like a rite of passage, like the earning the title of being a boy and becoming a man, if that makes sense. It probably does to you, Tom, and it might to some of your listeners. There might be people out there saying you sound like a complete wanker, but I just,
I don't think so, mate. I think everyone listening to this totally gets it, mate.
Yeah. Well, I hope so, because I didn't have a good father figure growing up, so I didn't really have anyone to school me with that type of lifestyle. I was kind of on my own a lot, and I had men in my life, but like my role model, who was my uncle, he was just a kick-ass guy and someone I loved dearly. And he first got me into dogs. He died when I was very young. And, my original father, he left my sister and my mum when I was 5. My stepfather was he was a strange guy. I'd probably say that he had bipolar and probably schizophrenia. And,
Jesus.
yeah, there was a lot of problems there. So I didn't have a good father figure. I didn't have someone to teach me the ropes, so to speak, to help me in some of these rite of passages. So I was a bit of a lost boy for a long period of time. And, finding Boyd and finding some of these people who were my mentors, and finding ADT, that's why I'm saying it felt so right for me, because I felt like the tribe that I never had, the people that I never felt like I belonged to, because I'd never felt like I belonged to anyone. I felt like I was really on my own, like not even from this planet. I felt like I was completely indifferent to everybody else. I had no real feelings about anything. I didn't really feel love or compassion. I thought I did, but this whole dog thing changed me. And I've heard Pat tell stories, and I've heard people tell stories. I've heard people have been in the military who have been pretty formidable people, and they say it wasn't until they had kids that they felt love for the first time, like they felt like a transformation, a change in their lifestyle. And that happened for me with my dog. Like he was an enormous source of rescue for me. He changed me, completely transformed me. It was when I say this, I don't want my mum or my sister or anyone to think that I don't love them or anything like that. But this is the first time that I felt responsible for something and truly loved something, like truly had that fatherly sort of feeling about something. this little puppy who became a magnificent dog. But getting back to, flipping back to that story, I wanted to be involved in security. I wanted to be in that world because I thought to myself, how else am I going to know if any of this is real? If this has been a waste of time, how else am I ever going to know until I'm in that sort of situation? So I was sort of itching to get into it. I was sort of itching, but it was for the wrong reasons also. And it was Jeff who put me on the straight and narrow. He sat down with me and, he'd been working as a cop for quite some time. He'd owned the company. He was sensible about that, but he also, it was a bit of preservation for his own business at the same time, I would say, that he wanted to make sure his business was in good hands and people weren't going rogue and doing stupid, reckless things. So he was, as I suggested, he was good in his mentorship. He sat down and said, mate, make sure when you're going out there, I'm going to give you a chance. I'm going to employ you. I'm going to throw you at a couple of clubs. Make sure when you go there, number one, like when I give you my company patch, you need to wear it with respect for me and respect for the people that you're working for, respect for the people that you're looking out for, because you will become a sentinel for people who need help, like people who need to be looked after, and like especially young women and ladies and so forth. When you're out there, you need to look out for them, but you also need to look out for the underdog too. People who are getting preyed on and all sorts of shit. And he said, because there's some real predators out there, and you need to be the shepherd or the sheepdog. He said, you got to decide which one of those you want to be, because there's a lot of wolves out there. And he said, mainly the job of the security guard is to be the good shepherd, to watch what's going on and to make sure that you're guiding the flock the entire time. So I remembered that, and I thought on that regularly when I went out there and when I started doing work. And one of the places I started working at was a place called the Station Hotel in Paran. And Jeff explained it to me as a trendy area, which it was. Paran is a pretty trendy area, but mate, it was rough. And it was really rough when I was down there. There were drug addicts on the street. There were people that were pushing. There was prostitution. There was beatings going on because there was a train station literally right next door to the pub. And there was fucking havoc going on there all the time. The first time my dog got a real live bite was down there. And it wasn't long that I was on the job that I watched him peel a guy open. And, for this guy was about 6'4". He was a giant and a really big stacked guy. And he came at me at the speed of light with a bottle in his hand, and Harley eviscerated him. And I was sitting there. I mean, mate, I hand to God, I would have got stabbed that night if it wasn't for my dog, because I just didn't expect this man to come at me so fast. And that was a real eye opener for me, because then I realized, oh, this isn't simulated stuff. This is real life. And people, do want to do grievous bodily harm to or kill you. And that was the first night. It was a real eye opener. As I said, it was a real awakening, because I watched this guy like literally pumping blood out of his chest when my dog had just gaped him open. And I thought, I was just sitting there looking at it, and I was in shock, complete shock. I still have a little bit of PTSD about it, because I still remember it as I have very vivid dreams of it. And I wake up occasionally thinking about it. And that's like 35 years ago or something like that. It was a long time ago. But and I remember him screaming. I can hear the screams in my sleep sometimes. It was a real different thing. But that woke me up also. That really showed me that when you're out here, this is for realsies now. This isn't make-believe stuff. Like, there are real people out there who want to do real carnage to people, and you've got to be on your game. So the other guy that was working down there at the time, he was a big Tongan fella called Dick. And Richard Dick, but he was in the pub, and he worked inside and I worked outside. I was looking after the outside of the pub. But Richard was a good mentor as well. He'd been round, he'd worked a lot in Tonga, he'd worked in New Zealand, and he'd come over and he was over here. And that man was a big, lovable, very friendly, great doorman, such a nice man, a man of God. He was just a lovely dude, but geez, he could throw hands. If you were stupid enough to get in front of this guy and try and throw hands with him, you're in trouble. He would
Yeah.
he would punish you. But he was,
Sounds like every pack islander I've ever known, man. Just big gentle giants, but you
oh,
cross that line and it's like,
lovable,
ugh.
friendly dude. But geez, could that man mix it up? And he was the same as what Jeff was telling me. He wanted to mentor me and just made sure that I wasn't getting myself in trouble. Because he said, at the end of the day, Glenn, he said, you got to decide whether you wanted to be doing this for the right reasons or whether you're not just another thug criminal who's here to cross the line and then use like a security badge or a security license in order to do rogue shit and hurt people and fuck people up for no reason. He said, you got to make your mind up whether you think that's a good idea or not. And he said, because I don't. And he said, we've had a lot of people that are down here. I've worked with those sort of people. He said, I don't like it because they attract a lot of negativity. They bring trouble with them. And he said, is that what you want in life? Is that who you want to become? And I looked at him and I said, no, not really. And I said, I wanted to test myself. Like I told him that story. And he said, yeah, I understand that. He said, like all young men need to, they need to sort of find their way in life, find out, like who they are, what their North Star is. And he said, and I understand that. He said, if you've been doing, boxing and fighting and stuff like that, he said, you kind of need to know whether you can do it in the real life. And I mean, when I was a young fella, I wasn't shy about, throwing hands. I wasn't worried about getting hit or hitting other people or anything like that. But at the same token, I'm not a monster. The person that really resides in me is not a nasty, horrible person that wants to, like see people fucked up. I did this job honorably because I do want to help people. I did want to make sure that, people had safe passage when I was working. And I worked that out fairly young, which is why, eventually I migrated onto forming my own security company with some colleagues because I realized, like I do like helping people. I do like seeing how gratified people are when you walk them to their car and, like they feel safe and they feel like they've got safe passage with you next to them. There's a whole thing going on the internet at the moment about women feeling that they'd rather be in a forest with a bear than an unknown man because they'd feel that a bear would be far less dangerous to them. And there's a lot of people who are, like rolling their eyes about it. There are men and women who are both, quite unsure how they feel about this. There's a lot of women who are certainly agreeing and saying, there's a lot of dangerous men out there. I'm here to tell you, there are dangerous men out there. Like there are a lot of dangerous men out there, but there's some dangerous women too. And, like I've encountered both of them on the street before. I've encountered dangerous men and I've encountered dangerous women. It's predominantly dangerous men. I do agree. Like I had to defend myself against some very formidable and dangerous men quite regularly. You have as well. Most of the people that you're fighting are dangerous men when you're in defense forces and so forth. But you're also fighting dangerous women as well. It doesn't mean they're not out there. They're certainly there, and they're cunning and they're certainly up to no good. But dangerous men are probably far more overt, where dangerous women are far more covert. They're very cunning about it, and they often inspire and encourage men to be dangerous as well. And I'm only talking about the dangerous women. I'm not talking about women in general. So any women that are listening to this, I don't want you to get your knickers in a knot and think that I'm not defending that position, because I do agree that there are dangerous men out there. And I say the same thing to my wife, like get to your car quickly when you're in the city or you're in a parking area. Don't muck around. Make sure, you're with people as long as you possibly can be. Plan things out, know your environment, know where you are, know who's around you, keep an eye on people, watch to see if you're being followed. Like we go through this on a regular basis. And Narelle and I have this conversation. It's something that most of the people who are probably your audience, Tom, know what this is all about. They've lived this life. They've walked that life. I still can't go to a restaurant or a place and feel comfortable with my back towards the door or my back towards the room. I still need to find, like when I enter a room and I'm sitting down with a group of people, unless they're people that I know have my back and can protect me, then I can put my back to the room. Then I'm okay with it. When I know that if something's going to go down, those people will defend me. But when I know that I'm the one that's been the defender, I still can't go in a room now. And I know, again, this is one of those eye roll moments for people, because I've had to change seats with people at restaurants before where I've said, sorry, can I sit in that seat? And they've said, why? And I've told them the story and they've gone, oh, nothing's going to happen. We're in a nice restaurant. And I said, you never know. Yeah, I've had to drag people out of places before who've torn places up and gone berserk. People with all sorts of things, from agendas to mental health issues to a range of different reasons, where I've had to go in there and do my job to get things back in order. So I know how dangerous this could be. This is not, this is probably the first time I've really opened up about this and spoken about this on a podcast before, because number one, nobody's really ever wanted to know about it. And number two, some of those things are difficult conversations to have with people sometimes. Some people don't like to know that, that there is a real seediness in some environments, in some cultures, in some states, in some nightclubs and so forth. They don't want to know that there are really, dangerous predatorial people out there, but they're everywhere. They're there. Anyway, I've been waffling consistently, mate, and you haven't even had one word to say. So I'm going to pause and give you time to ask a question.
Mate, that's good. That's what I'm after, man. I just
a waffler.
I'm happy to, yeah. I'm just looking for a time filler, mate, before I go to bed. I'm happy for you to riff, bro, because it's like you don't need me to prompt you about your life story. You know what I mean? Like, I'll just draw things out that I think are interesting. I mean, you drop so many different things in there, man. Like, and I realized I missed a huge part of your history, which is those early days with Boyd, doing all your dog training and whatnot. But mate, my assessment of you from listening to the Canine Paradigm, then meeting you and whatnot, is you seem like a gentle, caring, kind of guy, but I definitely think you're a bit of a hard cunt, man. So, and I think that's come from your early days in Melbourne, right? Because you didn't go straight to security. You had a long history of fighting and testing yourself and training. Like, what started that stuff? Was that just born out of necessity because Melbourne was a bit of a fucking hard place to live in the 80s, 90s, or?
No, that started from me having to defend myself against my stepfather. So as I said to you before, I'm very conflicted about how I talk about and tell this story, because in some ways he was my dad, my only dad, because my real dad pissed off and abandoned me and my sister. And, my own dad wasn't a bad person. He was just an irresponsible person. And he was irresponsible in the way he abandoned my sister and I, and continued to do that after he left. He was my dad was an extremely good businessman. He ended up becoming quite successful and wealthy. But he wasn't a good father to me and my sister at all.
As in because he left, or as in like he
left, he remarried.
Up, or
sorry, mate, say again.
Oh, I want to pick a bit out of that, just because I just had my second daughter born a few days ago.
Yep.
And I've got a 2-year-old, and I just couldn't even fathom, doing this for another 3 years and then leaving. I just like it fascinates me at the same time as it infuriates me.
Yeah, it's a sad story, but it's a story that millions and probably billions of people have endured through their life. Some people don't even know who their parents are. I would probably be rather in a situation where I didn't know him than did know him, and know that he didn't want us really to be a part of his life. Like we saw each other at birthdays and Christmases, but other than that, it was an inconvenience to have us around. And that's just the way it was. And like I said, my dad wasn't a bad guy, but he was a bad father to us. To his next family he was a good father. He looked after his children well, he supported them well, and he did all things well. But we got the shitty end of the stick. But my dad was 19 when he had me. Him and my mum, like most young kids do, they start fucking around. One gets pregnant, then the next thing you know, it's a shotgun wedding on the horizon. So I was born out of wedlock. My grandmother was infuriated, and again, you have no idea how matriarchal my grandmother was. I've spoken about her, and most of the people who know me well know the story of my grandmother. And at some stage of my life, I'm a chapter into a book, which I'm finding difficult to relive some of the stories I'm telling about. But I will
writing a book. You're writing one.
A book. Yeah, writing a book. It's about it's a dog. It's a book about my life with dogs, but it also incorporates how I became me.
I love it, man.
Yeah, it's different, and I've rewritten it so many times because it got a bit confronting, and there are some things in there that I wrote down. I thought people probably just don't need to know some of this. Like I'm happy to share some stuff, but there's things there that are probably still very private and could expose other members of my family, and it would make a lot of people uncomfortable just for the sake of telling a story. So I think sometimes when you tell a story, you can tell the truth, but you still have a responsibility to everything and everyone around you at the same time to still be at least an ethical person instead of just a son of a bitch who wants to, tear down the village. But getting back to that original question, my stepfather, he could be pretty cruel physically and psychologically, but then he could be amazing, loving, and supporting. And that's why I think he was undiagnosed bipolar. And I also think at some stage he had bouts of schizophrenia, because there were times where there was a time where he thought that he was like a messiah. He went through this really awkward and weird stage. And a lot of people have said to me over the years, close friends and colleagues, they've said, why wouldn't your mother get involved in this, Glenn? They don't understand that my mother was going through a severe, like she was going through mental carnage at that point in time. That's the first time she had a real nervous breakdown. And, like her mental health was in the toilet the entire time this was going on. So for her, it was just a shit sandwich no matter what. We're living on the poverty line. We didn't do bad. I'm not going to make it sound like we were, like we couldn't afford to live or anything like that. But times are pretty tough when I was a kid. And, my sister has a story in this as well, but I'm not going to tell her story of it because she's not here and not here to defend herself in it. But she had a fucking hard time with him as well. And it estranged all our relationships. It caused a lot of problems. But there were times where he, as I started getting older, he started really enjoying tormenting me and becoming physical with me, like hurting me. And, like we would play fight up to the point where I'd start doing okay. And then all of a sudden he'd start really wiling into me. And he was just a cruel man. But then, as I said, I don't know if he was in control of his life and his emotions. What I will say, and what I found out later on, was he was allegedly, and I will say this with some tact and carefulness, but allegedly he was the victim of sexual assault through his own upbringing. So I think that had a lot to do with the problems and the demons that he was facing. And I'm saying the word allegedly because I don't want to say something. I heard this through other family members. He never told me himself. He did say that he had a very hard time with his father. When my mum divorced him and we finally left, he rang me up one day and we were talking and he said, I've always loved you. And I said, I don't doubt that you love me. And I said, but the way you raised me and treated me was just fucking barbaric. And he's the reason why I've never had children of my own all of my life, because I was scared that if I had a child and treated it the same way, like if there was something in me that was triggered to torment my child the same way he did it to me, I would kill myself. And I mean, that was hanging over my head. And I thought, I have to break this legacy. I have to make sure it never happens. Now, Thomas and everyone else listening, I don't think I'm that type of person. I have nieces who I adore. I've got a great nephew and niece who I absolutely love. They're the light of my life. And, you know, like I can't wait to see these little kids. They're just amazing. My little nephew Archer, you know, like I'm kind of grandfatherly to him. I'm his great uncle. And him and I are best of mates. You know, like we hang out all the time. I take him shopping. I love spoiling him. I love hanging out with him. So regrettably, I kind of look at it and think, you know, like I could have been a good dad. I could have been a good father figure to a kid. But what if I wasn't? What if I was dangerous? What if I became a predator, the type of person that I fucking hated and despised and was afraid of and scared and spent most of my childhood scared of if I became that person? So those type of things shape you and they cultivate you. And that cultivated me and it made me violent and it made me want to. When I was in my late teens, that's probably a time where I was my most violent. And that's where I did want to hurt people because I wanted them to know my pain. And I wanted them to know that I was hurting inside. And I wanted people to know that this is what it was like to live like me. And that sounds crazy. I know when I listen to myself speaking and I'm saying,
not to me. No, I get it.
Yeah, well, maybe you do, you know, and there are people out there who get it. I know I've told them the story about this before and they've said, yeah, like I get it. And there's other people I've told them to, and they kind of look at me like, oh, I didn't know that about you. I didn't know that you had a, you know, like a violent side to you. But we've, like Jordan Peterson often says, you know, like we can be violent people, but we can also harness that and control that. And they're the people, you know, that mentored me, like Boyd and like Jeff and like one of my other martial arts teachers in the very early days, a guy called Peter, who I used to go around and train at his house with his family. Like that was like a privilege to do that when it was a mixed martial arts group I used to have. And he used to let us come around and train at his house for extra curriculum. He wasn't a weird guy. He wasn't into kids or anything like that. It was just in those days where, you know, like families and greater, like he was family to me. And he always used to say, don't be a fuckwit. Don't come around to my house and bring your shit to my house in front of my wife and my kids. Don't be those people. If you want to come around to my house, you eat at my table, you respect my four walls, you respect my, you know, my gym, my dojo here, you respect me, you respect everything, and have respect for yourself. Learn to be a man of measure. He was the first guy who ever really told me that. First guy who really made me, you know, like made me cry when I felt like I let him down. And really sobbed, you know, like really, really heartfelt cried because I felt like somebody that got me, somebody that really seemed to care about me. And I thought, oh, I've done something stupid, but he was a remarkable guy, and he also forgave me as well. So he taught me what forgiveness was all about. He was one of the first people who gave me a sense of what forgiveness was about and what depth of character was about as well. So yeah, man, it was a cool thing.
Man, you're dropping some knowledge, bro. Like there's so many little things in there that you were talking about, especially when you mentioned that club. Is that rain coming through this microphone, or am I okay?
I can't hear it.
Sweet, thank fuck. Yeah, like those you were talking about those early days when you had that club and all that community, and then you were talking about, you know, getting out on the street with the security, wanted to make sure that you could prove to yourself that you were capable. Like that sort of stuff, man, I think is so unbelievably universal to men and maybe women too, but I'm not a woman, so I don't know. But for dudes, it's just those are such important things to explore in your life. And for you to to have gone through that so young, maybe even like almost like a blessing and a curse, because I know that later on in your career, and I want to talk about that too, when you burned out in the dog industry and you're a bit fucking over it. Like to have found your passion and so much fulfillment and meaning in your life so early. and you're like, well, fuck, there's so much more stuff that I can do or that can go wrong, or yeah. Mate, tell me about, because I want to know, I want to dig into that finding meaning and stuff in the dog industry, because then I want to talk about when you burned out, because that the same thing happened to me, or a similar thing.
Circling back to, being young and being involved in all those mixed feelings and different growth scenarios and mentors and people in my life, I feel that at the time, I didn't really understand a lot of the message about it. I was just living my life day to day. And there were some absolute killer moments, like days that I wouldn't trade for anything. And there are days which, for many years, I blocked out of my head. And it wasn't until I got into, when I was a young guy, I got into hallucinogens for a while. I was doing a bit of LSD. And I remember the first time I did it, I was having a wild time, but the second time I did it, it unlocked some demons. It like the box off Pandora's box flew open in my head, and some shit really unbottled. And I started remembering things that were happening to me as a young kid. And, like, again, it was with my stepfather, and it was with the death of my uncle. And it sort of all cascaded at a point in time. And I thought, I don't know how the fuck I buried this, and how I'm going to deal with the knowledge that I remember it now. And I think with most people, I'm not a psychologist. I've been involved in the love and the learning of psychology through animal training, but I'm definitely not a psychologist. However, I feel that when you have enough trauma in your life, thankfully there is a switch inside your brain, if you're lucky enough for it to go off, to say, I think we're going to box this up right now and put it in the archive section, because this is just, we can't have this going on for too long and then have a healthy life going forward. And I was fortunate enough to have that shelved. But I also feel that when this reemergence of some of this knowledge sort of popped out of my head, and I started remembering these things, because I rang my mum and I was asking her about it, and she said, oh, I haven't thought about those sort of years for those sort of memories for years. And, what made you start thinking about this? And I told her, I said, look, I did LSD, like I was sitting there and I was sort of sucked in myself. It was like I imploded and sat inside my brain for a while. And I was literally unlocking these archive doors, like this huge room, and all this shit was coming out. Is it true? And she said, yeah, it's true. It happened. And as soon as my mum acknowledged it, it's sort of like it went and it clicked and it came back. And I was sort of reliving some of those horrible moments all over again. But there was meaning to it, because, and the point I'm trying to get to is that I needed that trauma to come back so I could understand why the people that were mentoring me and the people that were showing me how to be a better man. And I needed it to be archived at the time, because if it wasn't, I fear who I would have become and what I would have become. And it all happened for a reason. There was logic behind it happening. And it took me forever to realize that, because I was so fucking angry when when it reemerged and all those things came back to me. And I, thinking about my stepfather and all the joy that he robbed for me and how afraid he made me feel. Like, mate, we talk about classical conditioning in dogs. I remember the sound of his car when it used to come up the driveway, and I could tell, like from a classical response, I could tell whether he was in a good or bad mood just by the way his car sounded coming up the driveway. And I knew to be vacant at the sound of, like if his car came up fast and I could hear him turn the engine off really quickly, I knew he wanted to get inside and find me and take his frustration out on me. I just knew that was going to happen. And he didn't do it so overtly where you'd say he came inside and grabbed me and beat the shit out of me. He would do it precariously. Like he was sinister about the way he did it. He would set me up and he would make me think that I was the one who was a bad kid for doing something naughty, because then he would punish me for it. but he would set me up all the time. He was an asshole the way he used to do this.
Oh, how's your homework sort of thing? Oh, 1+1 is 3. You're like, bah, you fucking idiot, like, blah, 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 sort of thing. Like he just would lead you into it and then make it all your fault kind of thing.
Yeah, or he would make me feel safe about swearing, and then I'd swear, and then I'd cop it. So he'd kind of like, he'd play my mate, but then he'd play, like the punishing, the punishing parent. And it was a bizarre sort of thing. There's plenty of people who know what this is like. There's plenty of people who've lived this, but unfortunately, this is my pain, and that was my story, and that was the shit that I was going through.
It is fucking sinister. That's the word.
Mate, it is sinister. But the one thing, not the one thing, one of the things that helped define me and helped me become who I was is it turned me into a sentinel. It showed me early how to read behavior and how to watch people very carefully. And through him, the greatest skill that he gave me was I don't fucking fall victim to a lot of shit people anymore because of the way that happened. So, mate, for all of the shit that I endured through that, I can read people like a book. Most of the time, I'm not perfect. It's not like I'm one of these super body language people, but I am very, very sensitized to it. And even my current employer, when I've been in business meetings with him, I can tell who's the shady person in the room almost within 5 seconds of being in there. I can sit down at a board table full of people, and I can pick who the piece of shit in the office is. It's almost like they're wearing a neon over their head saying, I'm a piece of shit, I'm here to fuck you. And you can see it in time. This is why it's very hard for me to maintain friendships with people that I know are fucked units. Like the minute I know that you're a shit of a person, I like the old Sun Tzu saying, I just want your fucking head. Like that's it. I'll draw my sword and take your fucking head, and you'll be dead to me for the rest of your life. As soon as I know you're that person, because there's nothing worse than feeling like you have to share space with those type of people who are nefarious and notorious, and they're just sinister people in their heart and soul. There's nothing worse, and the dog world is rife with them.
I was just about to say, man, we obviously had
they're rife with those sort of people. They're people who suck at a lot of things, but unfortunately, they've got a talent for luring people in the dog world. And there's a lot of people, men and women, who are just terrible people. In saying that, Tom, and everyone else that's listening to this, there's abundantly more wonderful people in this industry. Like there are some amazing people, talented people, lovely people who are my best friends and people who I consider my closest allies and family to me. They're wonderful, remarkable, beautiful people. But there are some fucking shady motherfuckers out there too.
Yeah. And I think they stick out particularly because they've got a very distinct flavor.
Some of them don't. Some of them are very fun. Some of them appear like they're really cool people. They appear like they're comedic, they're funny, they're charismatic. They exude warmth and care, but it's all false. It's
narcissists,
mate. It's a firewall. It's carefully placed because they're predators in their real life. They prey on people. They are. It's like one of my friends was talking to me the other day, and he said, "Oh, have you seen this thing on social media about con people, con artists, and so forth?" And I said, "No." And we were watching the link together, and the person who was talking about it was involved in psychology, and they were saying the whole objective game of a con artist is to con you, but you kind of think, "Oh yeah, I'm aware of them," but you're not, because that's their profession. That's who they are, and that's who they've gamed themselves on being. Like you've got no chance against them because they're so clever, and that's all they do. They set people up like bowling pins, one after the other. The whole point of them is to go from one person to another, a small con, a medium one, a large one, whatever they can get. It's all part of the game. That's their dopamine spike. Like conning you out of something, getting you to to lose something, to give something up, to let go of something. They're just scammers through and through. And there's some fucking shit people in the dog industry who are like that. They're just robbers of joy. They're where fun goes to die.
Yeah. And we won't mention his name.
People listening to this going, what a negative conversation. But it's a truthful conversation. It's a real conversation where I'm talking, like I'm spilling the beans on some of the truth in the industry. There's some real fuckers out there.
It's not the world's worst, best kept secret, right? You're like, it's like when the media comes out and they're like, drugs in sport. You're like, oh, really?
Yeah, exactly.
Didn't know that. It's crazy. Good story, bro. And yeah, obviously, like recently, mate, I made the decision that I'm not doing, Facebook and Instagram comments anymore. I'm going to stay out of the DMs, that type of stuff. Because I had a couple of really negative experiences that just came out of fucking nowhere. And I was like, what's this all about? I don't know who you are. They're just, just real nasty stuff over the socials. And I'm just like, nah, I'm not taking part in that. And I just bowed out. Like I'll do what I do and I'll do it my way. But like, and it was literally like one or two interactions, but I've had 99% super positive interactions. And for whatever reason, this little 1%, it just really, man, it really stung, bro. It really, really did.
How old are you, Tom?
35.
You're sort of on that cusp of when the world started to change. Like your teenage years is when wokeness and political correctness really started to fire up and come about. Because I grew up in a very liberated age where a lot of us, we were larrikins, and men and women used to joke quite openly with each other. And, like if men got out of control, women would, slap them back in their box. And again, yes, I know there's still dangerous people out there. I get it. I know that argument. I believe you. I've been around in it. I've supported people in you. I know about that. So again, I don't need to be reminded about it. I get it. But, I did grow up in a stage where you didn't have to watch everything you were saying. You weren't watched and reminded that, you have to watch your P's and Q's. If you start a company, that you have to literally stay there silent. Otherwise, people are going to cancel you the minute you say anything wrong. And this is, like I'm watching people who pretend that they agree with what people are saying, but they don't agree. They're only doing it because they realize I have to abide by this narrative. I don't agree with it in any way, shape, or form, because if you're having a conversation with the very same person alone in a room, they will make the jokes and they will say the things if they believe they're in safe company, which means that, they're contradicting what they're saying in real life, but they're wearing a different mask. They're not willing to expose that side because they're thinking, well, if I really say who I am or really show my true face to you, you'll cancel me, or you won't be my friend, or you won't want to do business with me, or blah, blah, blah. I only want to do business with those type of people. That's the type of people I really like. I like people who, like can speak their mind. There are people, that I hear on social media from time to time, and I think, like, power to you, man. You can speak your mind, you can say the words and so forth, and you don't, like, even if you cop a bit of reprisal, you just manage it. Like you just turn around and say, yeah, you and your fucking woke friends can, eat a bag of dicks, whatever. And it's, like I still work for a company. I've still got to defend, their name and the culture and so forth. I've still got to be mindful about those sort of things. And there's certainly things that I don't want to say because I just think they're quite distasteful. There's names that I don't want to call people, or there's jokes that I don't want to say because I do realize they are hurtful and mean and ill-spirited and so forth. So I get that side of it as well. There is a middle, but I believe that, largely something broke in society. And I feel it more since that whole COVID thing happened is there was a real friendly, really good buzz just happening prior to COVID taking off. Like there was a good thing with the IACP over in America. The culture was really bumping and grinding, like there was some really good stuff going on. And a lot of us, even the Australian people, were speaking to each other a lot more, collaborating with each other a lot more. Boom, COVID came along, and it seemed to have driven a wedge in between a lot of people, or it created hustlers out of a lot of people. A lot of people realized, fuck, I'm in this for myself now. Like I've got to hustle, and I've got to do anything to beat you, and I've got to, like make sure my social medias are better than your social medias. Not always the case. Again, like I'm talking, when I'm talking like that, it sounds like I'm generalizing about the whole population. I'm not. But there's certainly a degree of change that's come about since that whole COVID 3-year gap happened. People are not the same. They're not who they used to be. Even the even the people that I'm very closely in line with, it's just not the same. Not the same.
Dude, I remember listening to the Canine because I got out of the military 2019. So like 20, 21, 22, I was pretty heavy into the Canine Paradigm. And I remember you interviewed Brent Dry, I think is his name.
Yep.
Melbourne guy, New Zealand dude.
Great guy.
And mate, I welled up with tears and I when he was talking about COVID and he was like stuck in his apartment and he felt like he had let a lot of people down and stuff. And I was just like, oh man, that like we didn't experience COVID up here like you did in Melbourne. I don't think anyone in the world did. I think it was the world's longest fucking lockdown. And it just broke my heart to hear him saying that. And I don't know that guy from Adam, right? But just hearing him talk about it that way, and then it really opened my eyes to the way that people communicate, and we really need that connection, especially in the dog world, because of that negativity. We need the people who are the good people need to hang out with the other good people. And if you're stuck there in your own head, you just...
Mate, Brent is probably one of the nicest people you could ever really meet. Like, he generally gives a shit about people, and he does care about people. He doesn't just pretend to be that type of person either. He lives that life. Like, if you're in Brent's company, Brent's the sort of person who, he doesn't pretend to be interested in you. He is interested in you. He's not preying on you to try and get something off you or try and sell you a course or doing anything like that. Even though he's got a business and he's got to eat like the rest of us, he's still not that sort of person who is a pretend cool guy. And mate, let me tell you, there's plenty of those people emerging that, like they're pretending to be all Shangri-La, but they're not that type of person. It's really predatorial what they're doing. It's just like lure you in, use my Venus flytrap and then sell you something. Brent's not that sort of guy. He's a great guy. He couldn't give a fuck if he had $2 in his pocket. He'd probably give you one of those dollars or both. He's just a lovely dude. And you're right. That was heartbreaking listening to him going through that whole procedure. And we're all going through it in our own ways, but I can tell you without a word of a lie, I was privileged during COVID. I was out on my motorbike. I was doing all sorts of things. I was living pretty well. I was on this property. I was playing guitar. I live on 5 acres. I've got dogs in the backyard. I was training dogs. I was out in the back. I was podcasting with Pat. I was living my life to a fair degree. So, yes, there were things that would get me pissed off about. And yes, I was getting my back up. And yes, I was feeling the disgust of being controlled and being captivated and confined and all those wretched things that our belligerent governments were doing to us all. But, and mate, they've got a lot to answer for, and the truth will come out one day. People will hopefully wake up out of this stigma and realize that, our governments really played us over this thing. But that's another story for another time.
No, I don't want to belittle what you were saying. You were making a good point, but like one of the best memes I saw come out of COVID was I think it must have been a military dude that made it, because it goes, a lot of you have never had your plans ruined by the government, and it really shows. I was like, yes.
Perfectly said.
Yeah, it was good. So dude, you're obviously a guy that there's no bullshit about you, man. I've never pegged you for any of that sort of. In fact, I've never pegged you ever, Glenn, and I never will. But I've never taken you
Thank
for a
you.
guy
Thank
that's.
you.
You're
Thank
right,
you,
mate.
Tom. I
You're,
appreciate not being pegged by you.
you're
Or
right, mate. That's all good. um, yeah, you're obviously you don't suffer fools, mate. We've had a couple of common experiences in that sort of realm in around the dog space. Have you always been like that? And what I'm kind of alluding to is in your earlier security days when you were probably a bit more unhinged than you are now, did you have a high propensity for violence in that industry? Did you look for it, or did it find you and you were just happy to fucking knuckle on, so to
a
speak?
bit of both. Yeah, a bit of both. It wasn't that I was just a raging lunatic that had to be satiated by violence all the time, but
Yeah.
I enjoyed it. You know, like I enjoyed the argy bargy, and I wasn't afraid of it if it was coming on. You know, like I thought, oh, this is, you know, like this is a time to test myself. And I remember I got towed up one night at a nightclub. You know, I was talking to a girl at a bar, and I bought her a drink, and her boyfriend, he literally king hit me from behind. And I remember, you know, like I was on my knees in the nightclub, and I can remember like the world spinning around, and I could see just out of the glimmers of me coming in and out of consciousness, like him being dragged out by the bouncers, and they picked me up, and you know, they said, "You've got to go too. You're involved in a fight," and that
I was what?
fucking pissed me off. You know, like that was the first time in my life. Like I went home, and you know, I had a broken tooth, and I had my eye split open, and I was fucking,
hell.
oh mate, I was steaming. I wasn't even worried about that. I was just like living with rage, and I was thinking, you know, like when I see that guy again, I'm going to punish him so badly, and the security guards who kicked me out of that place. And you know, like that was the first time ever that I was fueled with like fury that I was going to fucking teach people a lesson for fucking with me. Like it wasn't about killing or anything like that. But what I did want to do is I wanted to make sure that they were punished properly. You know, like they felt as
Like justice.
humiliated. Yeah. But I felt humiliated, and I wanted them to feel that humiliation. I wanted to do it. So I did. I got all of them. I got all three of them. And you know, one by one, I picked them off. But I thought, well, I'm not going to be stupid and walk into a nightclub and start a fight with the bouncers in there. I just waited for them one by one, but I taught each one of them. I said, it's just you and me now. Like you, when I was vulnerable and I was down on the floor, instead of coming to me and caring about me, you threw me out into the car park and threw me on my face when I was already, you know, like already fucked up. You didn't even seek medical attention for me. So now that I'm healthy and I'm back again, you and me, and I didn't publicize it. I didn't skite about it, but I whooped their asses, you know, like all three of them copped a good hiding out of it. And I was, you know, like, but it didn't feed the beast. You know, like I felt like it would, and I felt like that was the right thing to do. And I felt like once I do this, I'm going to be, it's going to heal me. The problems that I've got are going to go away, but they didn't. So then I realized it's not them that the problem is about. It's something much deeper than that. So it's like a point that I did want to make, Tom, is I'm not a violent person by heart. I'm not a person who doesn't make a shit ton of mistakes, because I do. I'm not perfect in any way, shape, or form. Some of the things I've accused other people of, I've done them myself. However, I can reflect on it and I can see what I've done wrong. And there have been times where I have wronged people, and I have realized that what I've done was a jerk move, and it was a real dick move to do those things. And I've sought those people out, and I begged for their forgiveness, because I realized that wasn't about them. It was about me. And I needed them to know that how sorry I was that I pulled them into my whirlpool of hurt and the things that I was going through. And I made them accountable for things that really had nothing to do with them. And, you know, like I said before, I'm not a hard dude. I don't want people to listen to this and just think, oh,
I think you are, but I don't think it's something you would ever say about yourself.
It's not a matter of wanting to be or even being a hard dude. I try to suppress that side of myself as much as I possibly can. like I believe there's a Hulk that lives in all of us. There is a caged beast. Some people can't hear it or feel it, but it's there, and push enough and you'll feel the cage rattling. The problem that I have is it's thinly veiled beneath my surface all the time, and I have to use extreme measures to keep it at bay, like to turn my back on it and not have it acknowledge it. Like I have to do a lot of regular work to stop it from controlling me and stop it from, because it's my alter ego. It's the other person that lives inside of me. This person now is who I've shaped myself to become and modeled myself over that pain and that hurt to keep it at bay and suppress it and push it down as far as I can keep it. But I can feel it, it's there. And when there are certain people that when I'm in their company, they don't realize how lucky they are that is something that I can keep at bay, and I can almost sing it a lullaby and stop it from coming out, because I just think to myself, if I let that go, I'm older now. I'm not as efficient as what I want. Like I'm an old fat dude now. I don't train. I don't do all those sort of things. So, I'd probably end up falling over and breaking a hip or something like that. Who knows?
I have fallen.
That's right. So, like I said, things change when you get older, and your brain starts to collate those sort of things a little bit more. But there are people that push me, and I can just feel it. I can almost feel my eyeballs cooking in my head, and I'm just looking at them thinking, oh my God, just please don't say one more word. Just know when it's enough. And I think sometimes when I look at them, they kind of get the message and they shut it off there. Because as a friend of mine said, he goes, mate, you've got the most horrible 1,000-yard stare I've ever seen when you get pissed off with people. And I think it's because I've got beady eyes. They're close together. It's my Dutch heritage of having these beady little eyes. But but it again, please don't misread me. I'm not portraying myself as some hard, articulated, gifted fighter or somebody who's, had an incredible youth as a street fighter. I'm actually confessing that I had a problem. It's like people who, have an addiction. I had a problem, and the problem was I was a very sad kid who grew up to be a very sad young adult, and carried a lot of baggage with me, and had no lightning rod to really help me, other than my beautiful cousin Dawn, who I don't want to talk too much about because I'll probably end up bursting into tears on your podcast. But Dawn was, if you walk past her in any given situation, you'd never realized you'd walk past one of the best people that God put on this earth. You'd never realized how kind and wonderful and incredibly generous and loving she was. And if it wasn't for Dawn was the saving grace in my life. She was the one person who really gave me the ability to feel like I had someone safe to talk to. And again, like if my mum listens to this podcast, she might do. I don't want my mum to think she's a bad person and she did anything terrible to me. My mum did the best she could. She was a good mum and she did the best she could. But, like all parents make mistakes. All of them do, because every generation gets handed a set of bent tools and they don't really know what to do with them. Like it's like a hand-me-down set of tools from your grandfather that are all rusty and bent, and they're not really good for the job, but you just make use of them because that's all you've got in your toolkit. And that was the unfortunate thing for my mum, because she had a shit life too. But she wasn't able to look after herself well, and therefore she wasn't able to look after me and my sister as well as she could. But my cousin Dawn gave me sanctuary. So I did have people, and they were thrown in my lap, which is what I'm trying to say to people is don't make the mistake of looking at the tragedy in your life and not looking at the gifts that have been given to you, not being so blinded by pain that you're too blind to see that there are some miracles that are actually being handed to you. You've got to understand that they're there. Sometimes your pain is so acute that you can't remember it. or it doesn't stand out to you at the time. But that's what age and wisdom actually does to you. And that's when you do realize I had a lot of opportunity given to me. I had a lot of people present. I had people there when I needed them. And I don't know how it managed to happen, but for some reason it was there. When I was in complete darkness, there was light for me. And I was fortunate to have those sort of things. So I could go on a pity party and talk about how shitty my life was. But in honesty, there are a lot of things I learned about who I am and what I needed to become and what I needed to do and how I needed to change things because of those things that happened to me. So I don't even know who I'd be, Tom, if those things didn't happen. Like, who would I be? I don't even know. Like, if you removed that out of me, it'd be a giant cavity in my life now. Like, I would be half a person, and I don't know if I could exist without that other person. I don't know if I could function without that other person, because all I know is the company of that other person that I keep suppressed beneath me, but also helps me function as well.
Mate, I hope this doesn't come across too clunky by asking this, but I always draw a lot of parallels between obviously humans and dogs, right? I tend to anthropomorphize dogs. I don't know when I'm supposed to do it, but I do it all the time, and I love it, and I'm going to keep doing it. I always, each of the dogs that I've ever owned, I've always given that dog a particular meaning to like where I was in my life at that time, and they've been like a personification of the way I've treated myself. The way I treated them is what I was really treating, the way I was really treating myself. And I can see you got that big. I'm assuming that's Harley in that image in the background.
No, Harley, that's Chaos. He's a puppy I bred. That's Harley there.
That's Harley. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Mate, can you, because I want to, you were talking about, this duality of yourself. And I'm just gonna like pretend that Harley was part of that duality, at least for a period of time. Can you describe Harley and like a bit of your early security stuff with him and like how like, was your relationship with him changing over time indicative of your relationship with yourself changing? Is that the most awkward way I could have fucking phrased that? But you get what I'm saying?
I do get what you're saying. It's a really good question, to be honest. If I was to summarize my life with Harley, I would say that we talk a lot about in these days, it's very much in vogue for people to go and rescue dogs, but Harley rescued me. He was my rescuer. He was, like I said, he was the first time that I felt responsibility and love for something. Like I felt that there was a something greater out there. I'm going to leap right ahead to talking about a time where I got depression, and it was the dogs in my life that got me through the depression. It was the dogs in my life that got me out of bed at that time. Like knowing I had a greater responsibility than myself, even though I could feel my life like literally imploding around me and all these sort of things that weighed on me finally started to spearhead through me. If it wasn't for the dogs, I would have shot myself. Like I just, and that nearly happened, like I was at a stage where I thought, I don't want to live anymore. I just don't want to face a new day anymore. It's just a terrible, I can't feel anything. I don't have any feelings. Like I'm void. And at one stage I even thought that I was dead. I thought I was in limbo because I just could not connect with anybody. I had no connection with myself. I couldn't feel love, panic, fear. I felt literally plastic, if that makes sense. I didn't feel normal. I didn't feel human. I felt like I was a wraith walking around the earth, haunting the earth, and for no reason. And I was at that point where I just thought, I don't know. I don't even know if I am here. I don't know if I'm real. I don't know if I exist. I can't feel anything. I can't really think or function. So maybe I should put this to the test and see if just a permanent lights out thing will fix the problem. And if it wasn't for the dogs, if it wasn't for them, it would have been a very different story because I felt that they gave me purpose. So that's jumping ahead into the story about, like how much dogs do mean to me. But if I circle all the way back to Harley, Harley came at a difficult point in my life, and I just moved out of home, and I really the funny thing about Harley is that he wasn't really my dog to start with. He was co-owned by myself and my best mate. So we rented a house together in Melbourne. We were living together. I was living with my girlfriend at the time, and we are also sharing with another person. So there was 4 of us living in this 5-bedroom house. Had a great big backyard, and we thought, let's get a dog. That would be cool. And we picked him up. We bought him from the trading post, and I went round and spoke to his breeders, and they showed me the dog. And at the time, I just thought he's a little Rottweiler. He looks like a Rottweiler. That was what he was advertised for. Rottweiler, $250. And I went around, had a look, and I thought, yep, that's a Rottweiler female, and that looks like a litter of Rotties. But it turned out later on in life that he was a Rottie cross, but it didn't matter. And, it really didn't matter. I didn't care about it after a period of time. I was trying
Sounds like if he was ripping the fucking peck off some 6'4" dude, it wouldn't have mattered.
Mate, apart from his amazing capability, which he developed, he was very much like a tuning fork for my life. And that's probably the best way that I could describe him. He just seemed to resonate with everything that I was doing. And I'd had dogs before. I've had dogs since I've been a young kid. We've had dogs in our family, German Shepherds and Dobermans and all sorts of things. But he was mine. Like he was mine and my mate's, but he became my dog. My mate moved out. I paid the rest of the dog off, and he became mine. And that day when he became my dog, I just thought, you are just the best thing in my life right now. Like, I enjoyed every minute that I had with him. When I'd come home from work, I couldn't wait to get my dog out. When I was at work, I couldn't stop thinking about my dog. In fact, I used to get in trouble at work because I'd be daydreaming about things that I was going to do with my dog, and I'd be writing down in my journal, like things that I had planned for the dog on the weekend. On the weekend, I'd go and do things with my dog. And it pissed everyone off around my life because everyone would keep saying to me, like, oh, you don't do the things you used to do on the weekend. You don't go out clubbing like you used to do. And I said, yeah, but I've got to get up early and do things with my dog. And, when people want to do and go out and rage and do all those sort of things, it kind of disrupts their life, and they get angry with you because they think, well, now you fucked my plans up because you're not there and you're not available for them. But that wasn't the case. It was just, I didn't feel like I needed that anymore. Like, all of that shit and emptiness that I was sort of going through, and just, going out and getting drunk or looking to get a root or something like that, I didn't feel like I needed to do that. I just felt like I've got purpose at the moment. I've got a goal. I've got a mission. I've got a dog to train. I got life to live now. I don't need to, find it at the end of a bottle or wake up in a bed with a strange person the next day and, have that uncomfortable conversation. Like, I've got something to do. And it was cool. Like, I started teaching him things. I started learning. I started meeting people that, were interested in their dogs as well. But I also got obsessed with it. And my obsession, like, I was overly obsessed with it. And even these days, where I see other people becoming obsessed with their dogs and, like, they live their life vicariously through their dog, I said, it's good, but it's got some pitfalls as well. Like, you'll start shutting people out in your life, including people that mean a lot to you. And you'll start looking for reasons not to go to birthdays and not to go to weddings and not to go to events. You'll shut all those people out because it's all about your dog and your dog and your dog, and taking pictures of your dog and doing things about your dog and talking about your dog nonstop, to the point where nobody wants to have a conversation with you because they say, oh, how are you? And you say, dog. What are you doing tomorrow? Dog, dog, dog. And it's tiring for a lot of people. For you, it seems like it's fun, but there's still a happy medium with that. And now these days, I do enjoy doing things with my dog. I love being involved in the dog scene. I love judging PSA. I love doing the occasional seminar here and there. I love teaching people. Like, I taught students for 15 years straight, and I love doing all that sort of stuff. But then I also love having a private life as well. I like having a side where I sit down and I play guitar, or I go motorbike riding on the weekends with my mates Scott and Dave. like there's alternatives to those sort of things too. And for me, I just find that gives you a healthy balance to your life. So if you like your dog and you're enjoying your dog and you're having fun doing all that stuff, that's great. But don't forget that there's still people that love you and care about you and would like to see you and like to be involved in your life. And, sometimes just don't completely shut them out. Like, talk to them, and maybe if it's important to you, invite them along to your dog events as well. Sorry, I'm going to cough.
Nah, turn your head and cough, mate. All good.
All good.
So when did you meet Pat? Was this before or after you had a little bit of burnout in the dog industry?
After. The burnout happened in Victoria. I was just training all the time, and like I said, it was becoming so consuming. And one of the reasons I had burnout, one of the reasons was I was training a bunch of people, and back then, it was a lot of cash getting thrown around. I was training a bunch of people. I had a little Saturday club that I used to do a bunch of training, and everybody come down, and I was the only person doing the training. I was decoying. I bought all my sleeves. I bought everything like most decoys do. And there could be anywhere up to 20 people coming down. And I was doing obedience with their dogs. Some of them were doing sport work. So I was helping them with their tracking. And then I'd throw the sleeves on and start getting hammered by all their dogs. So I'm getting pounded, like literally beaten from pillar to post. And every Monday morning, I'd be at the chiropractor's getting, adjusted and put back together, and getting therapy to like physical therapy to help with all the injuries and stuff like that, which is fine. Happy to do it. I enjoyed the work. I enjoyed the training. But, I think I was charging something like $25 a head or something like that. It was cheap, really cheap. And I'd put on, after we'd done the training, I'd put on barbecue. So I'd bring all the meat down. I'd bring some beers down, some soft drinks, and we'd sit down, have a barbecue, a beer, talk about life. Everyone loved it. Everyone paid. Everyone was good. But then a bunch of those guys got together and they started bitching to each other about how they should all come to me and say, we come here every week, we should be paying less money. The minute they said that to me, I said, no, fuck the lot of you. And I packed up my stuff and I left. And they said, what are you doing? And I said, I said, the guy down the road who's got like years less talent than I am and fucks up more dogs than he builds, he charges $35 to $40 per person. You guys have been with me. And I said, and all I do is develop myself, attend seminars, train and train and train to be the best decoy I possibly can. And you're bitching to me about this price. And I said, you really made me feel undervalued today. And I said, that's the first time in the entire time in this group I've ever felt so disgusted by the bunch of you. And I said, so you can get fucked. I'm not going to be in. And they said, oh, no. And I said, no, you go train with old mate if you want to learn about how to negotiate sales. And I said, fuck the lot of you. So I did. I packed up and left. But at that point in time, I was just burning out. And that was me being, that was my angry alter ego surfacing at that point in time there. I shouldn't have done that. Like, that shouldn't have been the end of that and the conclusion of that. But that was one of the triggers that started me on the path. And I started realizing not long after that something was breaking inside me. And the reason I left the industry and the reason I was burning out is because depression was coming. And, it was all that trauma that I was talking to you about before, because for every end of something, there's a beginning of something. And I'm not at the end of the story yet. I'm sort of midway through it, I think. But that's where that started to originate from, was just those comments or those sort of things. I found myself very easily agitated, and my first marriage was sort of like hitting the rocks. And there was probably a good reason for that too, because I was very absent with all the dog training I was doing. Like, that was a consumption in my life, was training dogs, living dogs, talking about dogs, breeding dogs. It was just a dog life, dog friends, doing things with dog people, hanging around with more people on the weekend that were dog orientated. And it infiltrated my entire life. So something had to give. the bubble was about to burst. It wasn't about just the dog training. It wasn't just about the people. It was about everything. It was an accumulation of all of it. It was all coming and heading for an explosion. And it did. And it just vaporized me at one point in time. And it happened when I was at training one night. I was in group training. It was my club, Master Dog Training in Melbourne. I was at a place called Doncaster. It was a Thursday night. I was out giving a class, and my mate Shannon came over to me, and he was involved. He was a psych nurse, and he was involved in mental health. And he came over and he grabbed me on the shoulder and he pushed me and he said, "Hey mate, are you okay?" I said, "Yeah, fine." "Why?" And he goes, "We've been sitting here looking at you staring at the ground for 20 minutes. And I said, "What?" So I'd lost time. Like I'd had a complete skip of time. I thought I just looked down at the ground. And then, like when Shannon touched me, I literally looked down. I wondered how did he make his way over to me when he was, like over with the group. And I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Yeah, you've been staring at the ground for 20 minutes. And he said, like we've been calling your name." And he said, "You're almost catatonic."
Jesus.
And he said to me, "Mate, I think you he goes, I've been watching you a little bit lately. I'm a bit worried about you. I think you need to go and see a doctor, or, go and see a GP and have a chat to him about what's going on." So here I am thinking, like I'm just having a bad day, like a bit of probably getting a cold or something like that. I go to my GP and he's already trying to get me on antidepressants. So he's trying to hook me on him at the time. He said, "Mate, like tell me about your life." I said, "Why are you asking me all these questions?" And he goes, "You've got depression, Glenn." And he said, like he said, the last time you were here and some of the things you were saying were not typical of you. And he said, "And I was worried then, and I'm even more so worried now." And he said, "I'd like to test you further and send you to see some other people." And I refused at the start. I said, "This is ridiculous. Like, this is the stupidest thing I've heard. I'm in control of my life. Don't you know that?" But I wasn't. I wasn't in control of my life. Like as I said, the bubble it had expanded to the point where it could, and it was literally touching up against the tip of a spear. So that that kind of imploded, and everything just sort of fell apart around me. But I couldn't give a fuck. I didn't care about it. I just wanted to leave everything behind. But there were things that were also happening in the dog training world as well, where I needed to walk away from things and from the way I was feeling about sort of stuff. So I did. I just shut everybody out, and it wasn't a good time, but it was something that I needed to do. That I needed to and again, like I know I'm sort of hopping around, but I guess I needed to see some of the things that were coming to save me while I was focusing heavily on things that were breaking me. But I did learn a lot about who I needed to become through depression as well. That sounds unusual to people who have got depression, because some people are battling it and they've been battling it for a long time, and they feel that there's no light at the end of the tunnel. Well, there is. There's always light at the end of the tunnel. Sometimes the tunnel is not the way to keep pushing down into the tunnel, but turning around and going back and heading back towards the way you came in, even though that feels counterproductive. That's the way sometimes to get out of the tunnel, is turn around and retrace your steps and go back out. And people go, "Oh, I don't want to do that. I'm losing time." That's counterproductive. It's counterintuitive to what I'm supposed to be doing, but that's part of the fucking cure, man. That's like sometimes regression is the way you have to go. Is you have to face some things and you have to walk through that mire and step out of it. But again, I'm not a psychologist. I'm not here to give people mental health advice. I'm only talking about my story, things that happened to me, and lessons that I learned about myself and who I became. Because when I came out of that, I became a different version of myself. It was like Glenn 2.0. Sounds corny, I know, but I became a different person. I became a more constructive person. And that's when I really started to be able to silence that nasty personality that lives inside me. That's the first time I was able to control that person. And I was seeing psychologists at the time. I was seeing people, and like I just started seeing Narelle, and my life started to improve then as well. Certainly having her in my life has been an incredible experience, and something I wouldn't trade for anything. You know, like that was very transformative, having her as my partner and then eventually my wife. And she, you know, she introduced me to, you know, better eating again and got me off all the things that were causing problems for me, and, you know, started introducing me to people who were alternative in different types of medicine, which I would have poo-pooed before, but fundamentally helped me have a big change. And I'm very thankful to that. And it's, you know, different sideline story, but it's a very big reason why she's doing what she's doing now with canine supplementation, is because for her and I, for things that were affecting us in a, you know, in a physical and mental way, there are alternatives out there, which if people are brave enough to try and stick with it and trust the process, and still work with other people, changing diets, supplementing, you know, living healthier and so forth. Sometimes these things have an effect. Sometimes these things do have a positive physical and a transformative change to your personality and your headspace. And it did, it worked for me. I know that other people I've had conversations with said it hasn't worked for them, but I don't know if they've tried hard enough. I don't know if their constitution is different, that their, you know, the trauma that they faced is certainly different than the trauma I faced, or even their genetics are entirely different than mine. So I'm not here to talk about anyone else's story, as I said earlier on in the conversation.
Yeah. And it's the whole mental health piece is such a puzzle, you know, it's like a never ending puzzle with no borders. You can make it look clearer.
There's no ceiling to it. That's the problem. Is sometimes for some of us, we can be very fortunate and we can escape the grasp of that black dog. And for others, you know, they never get away from it. And, you know, like I've lost friends, as many of us have in life. I've lost colleagues and friends who have taken their life, and, you know, terribly sad, because they're like, I've known people like Robin Williams that you just look at them and say, your personality is incredible. You laugh, you're inspiring, you're charming, you're beautiful, like you're an amazing, charismatic type of person. Like, how did this happen? That we woke up to finding out that you'd taken your life. But like I said, we're some of us are wired differently. Some of us, you know, like just can't seem to escape that wraith that seems to follow us around. And I get it. I get it. I remember. I do remember the time where it nearly caught up with me. It was inches away. You know, like it was right there on my doorstep. So I get it. I understand it. I feel compassionately sorry for people who have to tackle that, because it is like, it's the first time you come face to face with the demon, and it's something to do with you. So it's nasty business. And anybody who's traversing that road, know that I'm with you in that experience. And again, I know I've repeated myself several times. I'm not a mental health practitioner. I'm not here to give spiritual advice. I'm not here to give healing advice. I'm just here to give words of encouragement that, you know, try everything. Try everything. Why not? You got nothing to lose.
Yeah. Yeah, mate. I won't talk about myself too long here, but I went through some depression for about like 3-4 years. It wasn't like a long, you know, some people suffer for like 20 years. Mine was relatively short. And I really resisted those meds for ages and ages. I say ages, like probably the first year and a half. And then in the end, I was just like, well, fuck it. What have I got to lose? I'll just do it. Like, the alternative is fucking potentially, you know, blasting myself. So I'm not doing that. And then I did it. And then I did it for like a couple of years. And then I decided to get off it, because I was like, well, I want to do something different now. I don't want to be on meds the rest of my fucking life. And I think I've been off it for like close to a year now.
Yeah, good one, man.
And feeling heaps better. And like, being diagnosed with ADHD helped a lot, because it helped put an extra couple of puzzle pieces in that puzzle and go, fuck. There you go. It makes it a little bit, like, I understand a bit more about it now.
I know from speaking to people in a similar diagnosis, or even, you know, like finding out what the problem is that's a big relief for them, is just not a long time in their life, they just don't know what the problem is. They get told they're a bad kid or they've got too much energy. They get all these diagnoses by friends and family and clergy and school teachers and people in the community. There's a lot of people who say you're this and they give you a label, but until somebody in the medical profession goes, no, there is a real genetic reason that this is happening, and it's because you do have this attribute, or affliction, whatever, however you see it. But that's true. It's a fact. It is what's actually going on inside you internally. So now we know what it is, and now what it is. We can there are measures to work with it, and as science is progressing and mental health is progressing, I mean, mental health is much better now than what it used to be when I was a young guy. It was such a fucking stigma back then. Like nobody wanted to know anyone with mental health. Like you were a mental person if you had mental health issues. You were considered dangerous, unpredictable. Like these days, if you've got mental health, it's like breaking your arm. It's like I couldn't help breaking my arm. I fell over and my arm broke. I can't help the fact that I'm suffering from some anxiety or some depression. There's some shit going on. I need to deal with it. Like I need professional help to manage this. The stigma there's still a stigma about it, but it's not like it was when I was a younger guy.
Definitely, yeah.
Like, people would pat me on the back when they heard I was sick and go, mate, you'll be right. Have a beer. That'll sort you out, you fucker.
That's so old school, isn't it? Like,
yeah,
and even like
mental health strategies. Have a beer, go for a walk, have a look at yourself in the mirror, you fucker.
Mate, people used to say the same thing to, like, not exactly, but like kind of similar. Like, oh, fucking come out with the boys and hang out. It's just what you need, sort of thing.
The
and
sunshine.
I'm like,
what are you doing? Sitting inside, fucking feeling sorry for yourself.
Yeah,
I'd get that bit.
But I think you hit on something that probably ties into some stuff you mentioned real early in the podcast. And I want to move on from this in a minute because I know it's a fucking absolute rabbit warren. But you were talking about when you got the first bite with that big dude, and you said you potentially had a bit of PTSD there, reliving those memories, that type of stuff.
Yeah.
And what you just said then, you were saying sometimes if you just know what you've got, you've got a bit of information, you've got a box you can put it in. In my experience and observing other people, I think a lot of those mental health, those traumatic things come from unexpected things. So for me, going to Iraq and Afghanistan, I was expecting violence and death and trauma and that type of stuff. So when I saw things like that, I was totally fine. But it was the unexpected things, like when we lost guys, that affected me the most.
Yeah.
Whereas the rest of it, I was just like, yeah, I kind of knew I was going to see a dead kid. That was just part of it. I knew I was going to see someone with their fucking legs blown off, and it just, like, it wasn't a thing for me, and it's still not. But when we lost guys, that was the stuff that I wasn't expecting. So that's what upset me the most.
Yeah, that's a life that I don't understand. Like when Pat's revealed things that have happened over there, which are, it's not privileged information or confidential. It's just life things that have happened. But he's spoken of it on the podcast and just in general chit chat. It's a life that many of us will never know. Like I don't know that lifestyle. I've been involved in dangerous situations. I've been involved with, like people pulling guns on me and stuff like that in the streets of Melbourne, and people stabbing each other and gang fights and dogs mauling people, and like I've seen some shit, but I haven't been in like a situation where people are absolutely trying to shoot you or succeeding in shooting you or blowing you up or things like that. I haven't lived with that where I've had to sleep with one eye open or be ready to go or those sort of things. So that is a very foreign life to me and most people I know, but I've certainly I've shared experiences in that with people like yourself and Pat and multiple other people. Like I've had friends and colleagues that have been in Vietnam wars and so forth that have have been friends of my uncles and family. And I've had my pa who was involved in World War II, and my mum's father who was a prisoner of war in Nazi Germany. So, you know, like I've shared stories with them. I've heard things that they've done, but I've not walked the soil. So
No, I think what I'm saying is sometimes the trauma comes from the things that you weren't expecting. So
yeah,
some of that stuff like that you would have done in the on the streets of Melbourne, you would have been like stabbings, fighting, gangland stuff. To a degree, you would have expected some of those things, which is why they might not have stuck with you, as opposed to the first time it happened and you were like, "Oh fuck, that was totally unexpected," and your brain processed it a little bit differently, if that makes sense.
yeah. The thing about that situation is it wasn't so much Harley biting him. It was like it was a, you know, like I'd never seen somebody opened up like that. It was more the fact that I realized that if it wasn't for Harley, he would have stuck that bottle in my neck because I didn't react. I didn't believe that was real and that it was the first time and the worst wake up call. And fortunately, you know, like Harley was my guardian angel. It was just one of those things that was put in my life to protect me from me because I froze. I full froze, you know, and it wasn't that I was scared. I just didn't expect it. It wasn't believable, you know, like somebody really wants to stab me. And,
Yeah,
you know, like that lesson taught me, you know, like react quicker, like don't take this for granted. And, you know, like nobody snuck up on me or you know, like situation. I had a guy pull. He opened a bag on a job that we were doing one day, and he showed us that he had a gun in the bag, and you know, like rather than just like letting him pull it out or getting shot by him, we stomped on him, you know, and called the police and removed the gun from him, and you know, there were situations like that where those sort of things had to happen in those sort of days because I thought I'm not going to fucking have this guy pull that gun out on me later when he gets irate about something and end up shooting me. So I thought he's got an illegal firearm. He's going to get stomped on, and the police are going to come and arrest him, which they did. They came down, they did the job. You know, it ended up in me having to do a shitload of paperwork and lots of in and out of court and stuff like that. But fuck him, you know, like I was never going to get caught with my pants down again like that one. And that's what gave me the PTSD about that was because I thought I would have not been here today if it hadn't have been for this. It was, you know, like it was seeing my dog like open up a big hole in his chest. It was hearing him scream, you know, like a big 6'4" wharfy looking dude screaming like a school kid getting, you know, like falling over and grazing their knee. It was bizarre. The whole combination with how it all like culminated and accumulated together and how it sort of vacuumed in and exploded at the same time. It was like, holy fuck, what, you know, like I'm standing here on a front row seat for this psychotic fucking circus that's just exploding in front of me. And being a you know, like um right in the grandstand of that happening, it was very confronting. And that's the accumulation of everything that started that. And that's probably why I still wake up to this night. All of that sort of happens. I remember not so long ago, it was probably only a couple of years ago, I nearly fucking jumped out and landed on the floor thinking about him coming for me with the bottle. You know, like I just saw him coming like that and I jumped out of bed and I thought, fuck, you know, those sort of things sit with you for a while. And I've, you know, like I've had I've been to a psychologist over the years, and I've certainly that story has come up time and time again, and we've talked about that. This is the first time on a podcast that I've talked about this sort of stuff because usually I'm just talking about origin stories about dog training, but you know, this is the shaping of how I got into this industry and why I got into this industry and the things that were forming around my life at that point in time. And this is why you become who you are in the end. I often used to wonder those sort of things. And even there are times now in my life, I'm 54 this year, and I look back and I think, why did I do this? Or how did I manage to turn this corner? Or why am I here? And then I remember stories like that. And I think these things happened for a reason. Like they were part of my shaping process. And again, as I revealed to you before, and I think about it quite often, I used to look at it like this, that was a ball and a chain around my leg, all those, some of those things that happened. But if I take that ball and chain away that I've been used to dragging around with me, am I going to feel liberated, or am I going to feel like something's missing? Am I going to go back and want to put the ball and chain back on? And there have been a lot of people, you know, like when we're talking metaphorically about those sort of things, is they just think I'm too uncomfortable shrugging that person. Like I need that person to completely, like that's the symbiotic person of the two of us combining to become one person. And that's me. I'm two people living inside one body.
Yeah, and that's why I asked about when you met Pat, if it was before or after you had your sort of burnout hiatus from the industry, because
After.
yeah, and that's why I asked, because you and Pat, and I've had Pat on this podcast as well.
Hmm.
You and Pat seem to me like the odd couple, man. You guys are almost polar opposites.
Yeah,
Um,
we're very different in a lot of things that we do. And that I think that's probably why we've lasted with each other as long as we have is, but I also there's a lot of things that I really enjoy about Pat. I kind of feel like I never really had a brother growing up and I always wanted one. And I kind of feel like Pat is part of my he's a brother to me. Like he's like having a little brother around. And, you know, like I get to look on him and him developing his career. And I feel proud of the, you know, like watching him accomplish the things that he's doing. And it's a nice feeling to watch another generation come up. Because there's been times where he's experienced some pretty um, frustrating lows. And we've had, you know, the privilege of sitting together. And I've told him, mate, you can't let these people beat you down. You can't let these situations get to you and put too much on it, because you're going to be an important person in this industry, and we need more people like you, not less people like you. You know, and you're going to be part of the forming and the shaping of other people's futures who really need proper guidance. They don't need to be brought up by these fraudulent fakes and these phonies that are in the industry, and they're telling false narratives to people. Pat's not he's not a liar by any stretch. Like he's very much an open book. There's probably one of
got a
the
lot of respect for Pat in that way. He's
he's
just
probably
fucking
one of the most
straight up and down.
yeah, he's probably one of the most honest people I know. He'll call himself out and he'll call you out as well. You know, like he just doesn't like walking that life, which is it's refreshing to be around that, because I don't feel like I have to be on guard around him all the time. Which is it's certainly a nice experience when I've had those experiences with people where I've thought, what are your what are you planning here? What's your MO at the end of the day? Like, what do you want from me, and what are you trying to take from me? Because there's a lot of people in the industry who I felt like I've supported them, I've had love for them, I've backed them, and all I am to them is a meal ticket to get to the next place. Like they've used me to get connections, they've wanted my mailing list, or you know, like I, and I will be honest with you here when I'm saying this. I've, you know, organized seminars with people, and I've thought that the people that I'm doing it with, I've thought we're friends and we're colleagues and we're doing well, but I've misunderstood it. It was a business relationship, and I looked at it in the wrong light, because all they wanted from me was business. The thing that I didn't enjoy about working with some of those people is how cunning and manipulative they were. And they could have just said at the start, hey, man, this is just a business thing, you know, like let's just make some money together and, you know, do our thing. But, you know, when they stop calling you after they've got their paycheck and that's it, and the next thing you know, they're moved on and they're doing it with other people, cool. Okay, fair enough. That was my bad for reading something into it that it wasn't. But, you know, like with people like Pat and Brent, who you brought up before, I don't feel like I'm in guard with those people. I feel like if I need to tell them, I've told Pat things that I haven't told other people. I've told Brent things that I haven't told other people. You know, like I've been able to share some personal things in my life with them that other people I wouldn't have the confidence or pardon me, the trust to do that. I just wouldn't feel safe enough to trust them with that level of access to some of the private things that I've had happen to me or that I've done or been a part of. But with those guys, I do. And that's a nice feeling to have special people like that in your life. And there are a number of really important men and women that I've met through this industry that I can't tell you what they've meant to me along the way. And the in their own way, how they've been part of the salvage or the salvation that I've experienced in my career and even in my personal life. It's been very humbling, and I feel very fortunate to have shared like a long walk or a medium walk or a short walk with them, because it's they're good people, they're important people, not just to me, but for other people as well, the industry.
Yeah, that seems like it's been a bit of a theme in this podcast, mate. It's like integrity and honesty matter, right? And
Very
you've
much
kind of
so.
got to you've got to make sure that you can extract the right stuff. I mean, I semi burned out in the pet industry. I think I mostly just got over it a bit,
Mm.
and I actually want to go back in some sort of capacity to the training side of the house, not pets. But I'm still conjuring up in my mind like the positives extracts, if you know what I mean, as
Yep.
opposed to thinking of my previous negative experience. And I think generally that's how this conversation is sort of played out, like in your life in terms of all these mental health struggles. And, you know, yeah, you can easily just sit there and be like, the fucked up childhood, or this happened and that happened. You've just, and it's so cliche, but it's like, it's what you make it. You know what I mean? And I hate saying cliche things like that because it almost devalues the point I'm trying to make and what we've spoken about this whole time. But it's, in essence, that's what it is. You've just got to extract the good stuff and try and minimize and manage the bad stuff.
You got you got to acknowledge that first and foremost, we're all different than each other. And the experiences that you've had in your life are completely different to the experiences that I've had in my life. There might be some things that have been very similar. I mean, I know some people that have had a very frighteningly fucking horrifying childhood. Things that, like, I don't know how the hell they've handled it, and they seem to have come through it fine. They're good parents to kids. Like, they've got kids. They're good parents to their kids. They're not, they're not terrible to their siblings, their spouses. They're good people. Like, they're good, solid people, because they've shunned that sort of existence that's happened to them. I know people that have had a fraction of the shit that's happened to me, and they're all over the place. Like, they're like an exploded person that's been put together with crazy glue. They're fragmented, they're shattered, they're diffused. They're all over the place. And you look at the experiences that they've had, and they seem very minimalistic, but it's not to them. To them, for some reason, it malfunctions something. It is their own trauma. So I don't disrespect people for going through their own trauma just because it's not my trauma. And I would have been able to handle that. It doesn't mean that they can. And there might be something that happened to me that I find very traumatic and very humiliating and very personal, that they would have handled it and gone, I don't know why that's happening. And they think
little thing just popped up.
it was like a little thumbs up.
Yeah.
But they could probably handle some of the things that happened to me and think, that was just a Tuesday. That's fine. So the point, the long-winded point to this is, we're all different, and respect people for that. If people tell you that they're suffering with some trauma, and that they're, like a genuine sort of person, then they've got trauma, like, let it be. Don't feel that you have to try and fix them either. Like, our job is not to fix each other. Our job is to support each other and just do what we can. But when you talked before, Tom, about having to get onto pharmaceuticals to help you, there's a saying that we use in the training industry, which I think applies to anything that you're doing, and that is, use what works. If you have found something that offers you peace of mind, salvation, improvement in your life, and it's working, my God, use it. Like, go in that direction. It's there for you. Don't be ashamed of it. Don't be concerned at the fact that you might have to go to a doctor and be put on a course of antibiotics, antidepressants, or whatever it is, medicine for your mind, body, and soul, whatever it may be that's making you feel more fulfilled and making you feel functional and helping you get through your life. That's your own personal journey. That's what it is. I mean, you and I started this conversation off, it was talking a little bit about the security industry and about dogs. And, we did intend to get into talking a little bit about mental health. And I had every intention of coming on this podcast and not making it just an origin story about me, because I've told it, like a dozen times on different podcasts before. I did want this to be something different, a different conversation that hopefully other people can listen to and realize that there are shit things that we go through. I've never proclaimed to be a perfect human being. I've never proclaimed to be a perfect role model. I don't even know what a perfect role model is. I haven't experienced a perfect role model. I've experienced role models that have been perfect at the time for the application I needed, because putting the attribution of perfection on people is assigning something that's too difficult. It's too difficult a mantle to carry around for the rest of your life. Like, that is not a blessing, that is a curse. And there is a saying that I'll probably bastardize it by saying that when the gods want to hurt us, they answer our prayers. And I think about that regularly when I heard that conversation. When I heard that comment said in a conversation, I didn't understand it at the start. It was said a long time ago, but I think it was a ancient Greek philosophy. But there are times where people, they believe too much or think too much about perfection or the pursuit of perfection in themselves and other people. And it's that again is just not a healthy thing as well. So use what works. I think that's the word I'm going to stick with, the phrase I'm going to stick with, I should say. I feel that if you find something that is relieving you or your dog or whatever that you're pursuing and it's giving you joy, do it. Find that North Star.
Yeah. And that's a good point. And I want to round out the conversation on this. Mate, most of the lessons I learned in my life were during that really acute mental health period and then in business.
Yep.
Probably more so in business. Business has been a fucking brutal personal development roller coaster. It's really slapped me in the face a few times, man. Made me do a lot of self-reflecting. We're talking about constant improvement, right? I'm in the manufacturing business, Kaizen, good change from Japanese, constant incremental improvement.
Yep.
Like with your business or being in business, have you found the same thing? Is there like heaps of self-reflection, constant growth, always being fucking humbled? Like,
mate, let me tell you, if you want to be taught something, if you want to be schooled, start a business. The interesting that you're saying this, and it only was today. There's a lady in America. We interviewed her on the Canine Paradigm not long ago. Her name is Dr. Melanie Uda. Fascinating lady. She's a neurologist and incredible source of information. If you're not following her and you're into dog training, and if you're just into how the brain works and what and develops, she's certainly a person to follow her teachings. She was talking about how getting everything or winning at everything isn't good for your brain. It's the problems that we have to solve. It's the failing and learning how to overcome that and adapt to, failure and what that actually teaches us that helps us shape us into becoming better. And it's the tuning fork again, like you used that phrase earlier on about talking about my dog, but that is the tuning fork for helping you realign yourself and understand, like, these failures that I'm facing aren't defining me and it's not characterizing me. It is teaching me that that's not the right way to do it. I need to look for an alternative. I need to find something else that's not working. Because as they say, what's that saying? It says the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. I heard that years ago, and that really resonated with me because there have been times where I've done the same thing in training dogs. I did the same thing the other day in playing guitar, and I thought, what the fuck am I doing? Why am I doing that same chord set with my fingers in the same position when it didn't work 5 times before and I feel like I want to smash my guitar? Why am I persisting? It was only that thought that triggered me. Move your wrist, fix your arm, change what you're doing. It needs to be different. It's not successful. The last 4 attempts at this didn't work. The 5th one, why do you think that's going to fucking change anything? You must change. You must adapt. You've got to get better at what you're doing. You know, like had this conversation with Narelle the other day. She's been fortunate, man. Like she hasn't suffered some of the very pitfall lows that people have had in business. She's, you know, so far, touch wood, she's experienced good success where her product is in demand and, you know, like it's elevating. But it doesn't mean that she's not stressed. It doesn't mean that she's not overwhelmed. It doesn't mean that every day she's not working her fucking ass off because
pressure.
You know, it doesn't mean that there aren't days where she thinks, oh, I could give this up, because there's a lot of moving parts to it. But she did say to me, we went out for dinner the other night. We have tried to have date night regularly so we can talk to each other, because when we live in the same house, we're in, you know, other ends. I've got an office down one end, she's got an office the other. And we don't really communicate that much with each other. We talk to each other about things, but we don't communicate with what's happening. But our date nights are revealing. They tell us about, you know, like what we're thinking about things and why those things are important. And she said to me, you know, like if I had my time all over again, if I could reset everything and start again, she goes, I now know why people, when they get in business, like their first or second business, they're happy to, you know, like package it up and sell it off or close it down and then start up, because they realize I know how to avoid all of those things that I had to tread precariously through to get here. I don't have to do that anymore. It doesn't exist because I've done it. I've walked that walk. I know that lifestyle now. It no longer applies to me. And that was a fascinating conversation, because I've had that as well. You know, like I've had businesses which have done well. I've had businesses that sucked and fell apart. Pet Resorts, the company that I work for now, when I first got here and I arrived from Melbourne to Sydney, I thought, holy shit, I don't know if I've jumped out of the frying pan into the fire, because this business is in bad shape and it could implode at any minute. And I've just burned my ship at the shore. You know, like came here and literally, you know, had no planning of retreating back to Melbourne. What's going to happen if this falls apart? And it very much looked like that was going to happen. And nobody wanted to know us. Nobody wanted to do, you know, like when we were asking for sponsorship for things, that people go, you're just a fucking small company. Why do I want to sponsor you? Like you're nobodies. But now it's a different story. Now we're, you know, like a ever-growing empire that's expanding. Now people want to get involved. People want to invest. People want to be on the A train now, because it's, you know, things are changing. But it doesn't mean that there aren't days where people don't want to jump off a cliff either. It doesn't mean, and I mean that metaphorically, not physically.
I get it. Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that there aren't days where people are stressed. It doesn't mean there aren't days where people who have worked for the company no longer want to work for the company. All of those things still happen. You know, like all those moving parts and all those human relationships that formulate in and out of businesses working or being successful or struggling, like all that is still going on within our company, and it always will. It will never not happen. Those things that we fear most are part of our lives. They're just a normal part of our lives, the ups and downs. We're never not going to experiencing them. And what makes us look forward to the dizzying heights of the ups is experiencing the shitty fucking, you know, like hitting granite and feeling like you still have to go and get a pickaxe and try and chip through it, but then realizing, you know, like I've got to step out of this. Like I hit one more payload and I just found a gold nugget, and that's my out. You know, like now I'm out. That happens constantly on a day-to-day basis. You know, you might have weeks, months where things are all going your way, and then suddenly something happens. Suddenly there's somebody or something that's challenging the normal status quo. And suddenly that's a massive emergency that's going to come up, and you're going to get over that. And you're going to think, once this is over, it's smooth sailing for the rest of my life. No, the Mother Nature decides, you know, like one day the sea will be smooth and the skies will be blue, and the next day those fucking waves will be crashing around your boat. throwing you one way or another, and the skies are wailing and screaming it like a banshee, and life is turning you inside out. But that also, you know, like they also say, good seas don't make good sailors.
Yep. Yeah, I've fallen into that trap a few times, man. I just got to solve this problem.
Sailors. That's the saying. Calm seas don't make good sailors.
Yeah, I like that saying, man. It's good.
Hmm.
Well, we'll leave it on that, man. That was
We've gone all over the fucking place, which is not unusual for me. I am a world-class waffler. I've got all these convoluted stories that are all over the place, and I appreciate the fact that we had this conversation. And as I said before, it was nice to have a conversation that wasn't typical of a conversation that I normally have with somebody who is involved in the canine industry. I felt like you gave me a stage to talk about some things that have been on my mind for a while and are important. And, you know, some of it isn't popular conversation to have. Like sometimes when you're having these type of things, people say, "Oh man, that's super neg," but it's not. It's life. It's just life. Life is negative sometimes, and then it's positive. You know, like it's like the that's how magnets work. That's how the attraction of magnets work. Is one side is negative and one side is positive, and positive attracts negative, and so on and so on. And that's what happens in our role of life as well. I'm not a great philosopher. I'm not a hard man. I'm not all these things. I'm just a dude that's like everybody else. I'm just trying to work out what I need to do in life to get by without fucking myself or other people over. And that's, you know, that's my story, mate. Is I'm still I'm an older guy than what I was when I started all the way back then, but I'm still trying to work shit out. Some days I get scared, and sometimes I don't know what the fuck I'm doing, and other days I think everything's falling in line. But that's normal, and it's okay to be like that. And that's what I had to. That's, you know, one of the pearls of wisdom that I can share with people is it's okay to feel uncertain. It's okay to feel like you haven't got everything under control all the time, but when on the days you do feel like that, don't clam up. Like, talk to people. That's one of the messages of salvation that I can offer you, and community, and brotherhood, or fellowship that you can do is talk to people. You know, like there are some wise people out there, and I've been very, very thankful, and I have enormous gratitude that there is a large audience of people that will tolerate my stories and my questions, and also offer fair and constructive and welcomed feedback. So to all those people out there, if you're listening to this episode and you know me and you've been one of those people in my life, I can't thank you enough for the time you gave me, because I cannot express to you how valuable your time is, and it's nothing that I want to take for granted. And thank you for your time too, mate. I appreciate having this conversation with you today. And I think this is the longest you and I have talked, but we've certainly talked.
It is. Yeah, it is. And mate, I've in the past, I've probably had a bit of a tinny style personally, and I'm trying to get away from that. I'm trying to get away from that, like childhood, career, highlights, incidences, what are you doing next sort of thing. Because somebody said, you know what? It was another podcast I was listening to. They were like, the best podcasts is the ones where you just talk about what interests you.
Yeah, it's not contrived. It actually is a
Yeah.
story about real shit that goes on. And it's amazing that this is where fellowship comes from, because people listen to the stories and they go, fuck, I've experienced that before. You know, like you said, there's been podcasts that I've listened to and I thought, man, that resonated with me. That was just two people talking. You know, it could be a couple of girls or a couple of guys or whoever, some hosts of a show. And I've listened to it and I thought, holy shit, that penetrated my soul today. You know, like I felt really tuned into that. Like there was something powerful that just happened with that conversation. I'm glad that I was an active part of it. So yeah, totally get it.
Yeah, that was definitely the canine paradigm for me, mate, when I was in the up to my nuts and guts with fucking dog training and developing Malinois and all sorts of stuff, mate. That was like my baptism of fire, so to speak, into the canine industry when I left the unit. So thank you as well. But mate, I'm gonna let you go to bed, bro. I'm gonna go to bed as well. I think my wife and my entire family upstairs are all sleeping now, but
Yeah, Narelle just walked in. She's just gave me that look like, I'm going to bed. I'm tired.
you podcasting again?
Just before we do close out.
Go for it. Go for it.
When I originally met you in person, which was at the Send conference we had, which Red Team organized, you were telling you had a fascinating story. Like I was looking at your material and the things that you're selling. We were having a conversation. You said that you had a to-do list of things that you wanted to achieve. How's that list going?
Well, I've forgotten what's exactly on that list that you and I would have talked about, but generally in my life, I feel pretty good, mate. I'm like slowly achieving all the things that I want incrementally. I've given up on a couple of things that were anchors that weren't that important to me. I realized I'm never going to make $1 million in this job, so I'm just going to enjoy the process. Mate, I've got a couple of beautiful kids now. I've let a few things
Congratulations
go.
too, mate. On you just
Thanks,
had a baby,
mate.
like during the last couple of days, like you became a father again.
Yeah. It's man, it's been like, we're talking about people realizing certain things when they have kids. That was definitely what happened to me, man. I mean, yeah, not like I never knew love before or anything, but like having kids changed the entire paradigm of my life.
Yeah,
For
that's
sure,
awesome.
for sure. Now, I've got to ask you: when we were chatting at Red Team, did I like give you like a list of things to write down and be like, check in on me, make sure I achieve this list?
Yes.
Or you because we're just having it? Oh God, don't read it because I probably haven't achieved it. What is it?
Well, one of them was you were hell bent on getting a Dodge Ram.
Oh, I'll still do that. Still on track. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, you're making a
Oh,
million.
we're talking about goals, bro, and we were talking
Yeah,
about like
your house, your dream house,
yes.
providing for your family, being happy and content in your role. Like it wasn't all, it wasn't all about material goods. It was just about, like living your best life, like things that mattered to you and your family. And it was good. I listened and I thought that's a pretty cool thing that you've got a vision board that you've got in your pocket.
Yeah. You can't see it, but like there's a picture of my Dodge Ram up there on the wall that I still want to get.
Nice.
Picture of the TD 30 kV, I think it is, drum kit that I want as well. Yeah, I'm still on track, bro. I've probably I mean, I've probably achieved some of the immaterial things achieved. Like I'm sort of like that part of my puzzle is becoming clearer, if that makes sense. So no, I'm on track, bro. I'm on track, and I appreciate you checking too.
Cool. Well, mate, you're 35 years old. You certainly, like you're not towards the end of your life. You got plenty of time. And that's, you just, I think one of the weird things about life is that, you make these plans and other things happen. And you think, oh, fuck, that's, thrown me off course. But sometimes those course corrections are a blessing, not a curse. And, I think what I've felt more inclined to look at now is what am I learning about these experiences, the good and the bad things? Like sometimes the good things, I even have to sit back and go, is it really as good as I'm thinking? Or is there, like, am I overthinking this? Or is it really as bad as I'm thinking? Am I overthinking this? Or what was the lesson? What am I learning about this when things are going pear-shaped and I'm not feeling so confident or I'm a bit nervous about a situation? Like, what is it teaching me? What was the lesson that I was supposed to take out of this? Those are helpful times when you feel like things are spiraling, is control the spiral, like just go into free fall for sure, but pull your parachute before you start tumbling to the ground and just think, okay, what's the lesson? What do I got to learn?
I'll throw another quote out here and we can end on this one.
Yep,
And I
sounds
think
good.
this is a John Lennon quote. Life is what happens when you're busy making other plans.
Exactly right. Yep, I heard that quote before and I love it. I'm glad you reminded me of it.
Yeah, we'll leave it on that one. Hey, Glenn, massively appreciate you coming on, bro, and sharing your story and talking about some pretty nasty stuff, man. Like you didn't hold back, and I massively appreciate it.
It's just stuff. It's just
Yeah.
experiences. It's, like we can look at it as nasty and negative or whatever it is, but it's just like it is stuff. It's just life defining stuff. There were times where I was embarrassed about all that stuff and I really didn't want to talk about it. And there's other times where I felt like if I do talk about it, people are going to think I'm a giant knob with a, like a violent streak or something like that. So, but I just want people to know it's just, it doesn't define me. It doesn't control me. It's just things that happened. And, like the accumulation of what happens, as you said, these are the things that happen while we're busy making a life, as John Lennon said. I just butchered that quote, but they're the things that happen. Just things that happen.
Well, it was a good chat, mate.
It was a good chat, and I feel like I let a bit of a genie out of a bottle, mate, which is good.
Good. Well, after this, mate, I'm going to speak to you after. You know what? Actually, you know what? I'll just end it and then I'll speak to you.
Cool.
So, Glenn, thanks for coming on. Appreciate it, man.
Thanks, buddy.
We hope you enjoyed that episode of the Origin Canine podcast. Tune in next week for another episode. In the meantime, go to origincanine.com, check out our safe, innovative, and built-for-purpose canine equipment.